Look at that. Live. Looks like I'm live. Perfect. Thanks for the tips, Facebook. Always giving me the tips. Really appreciate that. Oh, okay, yeah. Gonna do that, gonna do that, gonna do that. There we go. There we go. Here we go. All right. We got things set up now. I keep going back and forth about whether I should wear my glasses or not because these glasses are super, super glary. So I apologize because look at that, like super glary. Although on Instagram it's not quite as bad, but on Facebook it's quite intense, the glare. But like, if I take my glasses off, then I can't see anything. Ah! Since when am I that person who can't see anything without glasses? I like better than 20/20 vision my whole life. And now my optometrist is like, you're gonna need like, what are they called? The blended. You're gonna need those in like, probably in like the next 2 years. The next time you see me, you're gonna need the graduated ones. I'm like, I feel like my body is giving up. It's all good. It's all good. Oh, thanks, Catherine. Thanks. Yeah, I love these glasses too. I love them, right? They're like, hi. These are not the like, I wear glasses now. These are like, hi, I wear glasses now. You're welcome. That's what these glasses are. They're like, hi. Anyway, all right, friends. Let's get these office hours started, shall we? So, my name is Dr. Shannon Coates, and I am here at Voice in the Art of Teaching headquarters, which I've just started calling it that. Here we are at Voice in the Art of Teaching HQ. And that is north of Toronto, about 45 minutes to an hour north of Toronto, depending on where you think the edge of Toronto is. I'm about an hour. No traffic. No traffic. Which now is probably almost all the time, actually, COVID. But no traffic in about 45 minutes from here to the Opera House or from here to like, the music theater, to the theater, big theaters. Yeah, about 45 minutes, no traffic. But that never happens, so let's say about an hour. Hour north, here in the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeweke, the Mississauga, and the Wendat-Quiniyoit peoples. These are the lands that were under the Williams Treaties of 1923. Something to consider when you consider where you live and work. Who came before you and who are the current stewards of the land? Who are the continuous and current. Oh, thanks, Allison. Very glam. Thank you. So today, I want to talk a little bit about motivation in the voice studio. I wanted to talk tease out a little bit about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, external motivation factors, how we encourage internal motivation. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about where this idea of requiring external motivation comes from and why it's damaging. So, or why it can be damaging anyway. I wanted to just kind of address that. So I wanted to talk about that first. And I wanted to just acknowledge, I was thinking about doing this last week. I was sort of, what's going to be my sort of theme for the week? What are we going to, try to pull out this week? And so I was thinking about internal, external motivation because this is something that comes up in the forums all the time, right? And I was certainly clued to this by something that I saw in one of the online forums. But this definitely comes up all the time in the forums. My students don't practice. How do I motivate them? How do I help students to have better practice routines? So and so isn't writing in their music and they're the worst student ever or whatever, like they're not making notes in their music or whatever, right? Like we have all of these kind of things that we kind of have taken on as very important in the voice studio, and so then we are, because we want to be good voice teachers and we want to do the best by our students, we tend to maybe over apply some things. And so I want to talk about that today. So when I was thinking about doing this, and as I'd already started posting about it, then Katia Piscitelli, who is the boho. Oh gosh, I didn't write down her Instagram handle, but it's the boho speechy at boho speechy. Also, then had been writing some stuff, and so Katia is a speech language pathologist in California who works with children, I think in schools, mostly with children anyway, and youth in schools mostly, I think. I may be wrong on that, but so her perspective, and she works with neurodivergent folks as well. So her perspective is, more toward the classroom education model, and but a ton of the stuff that she posted this week was really very applicable in the voice studio and very much along the lines of what I wanted to talk about. So I was like, okay, love that. Something in the zeitgeist. People are doing people are thinking about this stuff, which is terrific. So speaking of the classroom model, when my kids were in primary school, so my kids are teenagers now, when they were in primary school, often there is this sort of external motivation model where, there's this external motivation model where, there's like a chart for who's in the reading groups and who's read so many books and anybody have kids in the schools where, they have to sell a certain amount of magazines or whatever the fundraising is. And then if their class sells that amount, then they get to do something fun or they get prizes according to how many they've sold. This was like, I couldn't articulate why at the time, but these kinds of things gave me so much anxiety and anger. Like I was so angry about these things at the time when my kids were younger because it caused so much heartache in my kids. My kids, like, they saw that they wanted to achieve the thing and they wanted to help their classmates and they wanted to like be as good as so and they couldn't necessarily. Some of the behaviors that were being encouraged by these external motivations and these charts and the like who's sitting and who's not and who's like who has a yellow sticker and who has a red sticker and who has a green sticker, like who's following the specific behavioral model or the specific behavioral requirements in order to get these things was very stressful for my kids. Very, very stressful. And not only was it stressful for them in terms of them feeling like they weren't going to be able to do, they weren't going to be able to live up to these standards, they weren't going to be able to do these things, and they were never going to be able to sell enough magazines. Let me just say that right now. Never. Like, we always ended up with lots of magazines we didn't need because I'm not going to, anyway. I hate that model of fundraising, and I know teachers hate it too, and it's just horrible. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. So not only was it causing a lot of anxiety in my kids in terms of not being able necessarily to keep up and to be able to get the rewards, but it was also very anxiety producing for my kids who are rule followers. It was very anxiety producing for them to see other kids not being able to reach those standards and get the rewards. So it was incredibly stressful for my kids when other kids would, speak out without raising their hand, and then they would get a yellow sticker, or they would get a red sticker because they weren't doing the thing. Like, incredibly stressful for my kids to see that happening, right? Like, just to see the other kid, so my kids in the classroom are spending a lot of their time when they were younger, was spending a lot of their time like managing this like high stress situation for them because of this external reward system teachers in good faith are trying to manage classrooms, right? So like they're putting these things in good faith and they're trying to manage behavior and motivation in classrooms. So I couldn't articulate at the time why those things were so frustrating. I mean, I knew that it was frustrating for my kids. I knew it wasn't the best thing for my kids, but I couldn't really articulate why at the time. And also compounded into this whole thing was the fact that I was like, but isn't that the way that we're supposed to manage classrooms? Isn't that the way that we're supposed to do this? And compounded into that was the fact that I was really good at following all the rules and I didn't have any learning difficulties necessarily. So like I was reading very early and I always won all the reading awards and I always did my work real fast and got it over with so that I could like I got the rewards to read at the end, like I was the academic system. I was very much built for the academic system, except for maybe the talking part. The staying quiet part wasn't really built for that. But the rest of it, I was pretty much built for the academic system. So all of these things were kind of combined in with me not being able to articulate why I found this externally based reward system so like frustrating, and why it was enraging for me, and why are you doing it this way? It's horrible. And yet I couldn't articulate why. So as my kids started to get older and as I started to I started to try to use some of these things in my parenting. So let's be honest here, if you have kids of a certain age and you are working on toilet training, for example, toilet training, like there's lots of systems out there in terms of toilet training where you are encouraged to have like, here's their favorite toy at the end. Oh, thanks, Rebecca. Here's their favorite toy at the end of this like long, calendar or whatever. And if they like get a sticker in every single one of these things, then they get their favorite toy, and they have to, way they get a sticker is by like going on the potty, and like there's lots of, and to be perfectly honest, that motivates some folks. It was disastrous for my kids. My kids are not motivated by that. And on top of that, they couldn't figure out why they couldn't just have the toy. Why am I being so mean? And not just giving them the toy. And also they couldn't necessarily associate the picture of the toy with the fact that they were going to get something. It was disastrous. As well as using those kinds of reward charts for like cleaning your room and other kinds of behaviors that we are often encouraged to use these like external reward methods for. And I'm not saying that these are terrible things. They're not, and I'm not saying that they aren't useful in some cases, but here's the issue. So here's the reason I'm now able to articulate the reason that often these things are not useful and in some cases are actually causing damage. First of all, we often create external reward systems around behaviors that we don't question. So we see specific behaviors, and I'm talking now about in the voice studio specifically. So we see specific behaviors and specific kinds of actions and ways of interacting as being the right way to do the thing. And so we don't question, is that really the right way or the only way or the best way to do the thing? We don't question it. And then we put an external reward system in place. We impose our ideas of what are the best behavioral practices onto our students and into our studio, and then we impose these external reward-based systems onto the students in order to get them to do the thing we want them to do. Because we're working from this assumption that what we want them to do is the right thing, and is the good thing, and is the best thing. Because we haven't necessarily questioned some of those things that might not actually be the right thing or the good thing or the best thing for all of the students. So for example, some examples are in the voice studio, all of our students should learn to read music. They should learn to read music. I'm not saying that this is right or wrong. I'm saying this is one of the things that we take on and that we decide, we don't question, and we decide, and so then we apply an external reward-based system onto students in order to get them to learn to read music. without any questioning, right? Some of the other things that we have decided, that every student must practice regularly in a specific way, right? So every student must practice, every singer must practice. If they don't practice, they're not going to get better. They're not going to go as far as they could, blah, blah, blah. So we have this whole thing that's all in our heads around practicing that we've been told and that we have taken on, but we often don't question it, right? We don't question it. Now, if you've been teaching as long as I have, and if you've been teaching teens as long as I have, you start to question that, whether every student needs to practice regularly or not, in order to do their best. And also you really do start to question what practicing looks like, right? You start to question, wait, are these components to practicing actually like as important as I think they are? Are they actually all, do they actually all have to be there in order to consider that this was a good practice session? We start to question that if you've been teaching as long as if you start to question, if you haven't started to question it, that's fine. I'll tell you, I started to question it pretty early in my teaching, especially after I taught a lot of teenagers, right? And I'm just like, it can't be just that I'm only attracting teens who never practice, right? Like, it can't be that. It can't be that, like, there must be something else here. I must have something going on that's telling me that, like, it can't be that every single teen is, like, unmotivated to practice in the way that I tell them to, right? Like, there must be something else going on here. Anyway, some of the other things that you must learn music by reading the music. So you must learn the music from the score. That's something else that, especially if you've had a Western classical training, or been trained by someone who is Western classically trained, that is something that will be very intensely inside our bones. You must learn music by reading the score. The score is the big thing. It's the only thing. You must stand still for your entire lesson. Otherwise, you're not concentrating or focusing. And also, I literally know singers who have heard this. Well, you can't sing if you're not standing. You're not going to be able to sing well if you're not standing. You can't, you won't have good posture, whatever that means, if you're not standing. So I know lots of singers who have heard this throughout their career and throughout as they've studied, right? Like, that you can't possibly be singing well if you're not standing, and you can't learn to sing if you're not standing for the entire lesson. And not only just standing, but you can't just be standing. You have to be standing still, and you have to be standing in a specific way, and you have to be, there are all of these things around okay. Also, you have to learn specific styles or kinds of music. We've talked about this before. I've talked about this before, and lots of people talk about this. The fact that, if you're not learning classical style or classical technique, whatever that means, let's just put that out there, whatever that means, right? If you're not learning classical technique, then you're going to hurt yourself. And if I'm not teaching classical technique to my students, then they're going to, they're not going to, I'm not doing the best by them because I'm not teaching them like classical technique, whatever that means. Yes, Allison. Oh, yeah, so true. So Allison's saying, I swear their practice is sometimes their weekly lesson. Yes, I hear you. But gosh, I love the students that do practice. Yes, exactly. Very refreshing when you have a student who practices. But again, this comes back to okay, we're going to talk about it in a minute. We'll talk about that in a minute. And like, students have to show up every single week and have a lesson every single week. And they have to have like a perfect attendance record in order to learn best, right? Rebecca says, I love it. I love debunking the standing still. Lessons are so much better now in my studio with the Bosu ball, stretchy bands, yoga ball, monkey noodles, so much better. Exactly. Young kiddos and teens need to move, and they love it. I absolutely agree. As you know, Rebecca, I 100% agree. So, and there's something weird going on here. There we go. Yeah. So, those are just some of the things that we don't necessarily question. And there are lots and lots more, right? But those are some of the things that we don't necessarily question. And then that we build these behavior-based external reward charts or things, rewards around, because we want to motivate those behaviors, right? So we're like, okay, these are the behaviors that we must have. We don't question. We say like, these are must-have behaviors. They must have these behaviors. And then we see that our students aren't necessarily doing those behaviors or aren't necessarily doing it of their own free will. And so then we come up with, because out of the goodness of our hearts and because we want to be good voice teachers, whatever that means, we then create these external methods to motivate these behaviors that we say are, that we have taken on as being very, very important. So we create these charts, right? We create practice charts and practice calendars, and we create practice journals, and we help students make schedules, and we give them we give them rewards if they've stood still for the entire lesson, and we give them we come up with all of these things. And if they do their homework every week, then we give them like a sticker, and then they get something at the end. Like, we come up with all of these things again because we are trying to do the best we can for our students, but it's misguided, because what happens when we impose our ideas of what the best behavior is, the goodest, when we impose that on students, and then we impose a external behavior-based reward system based on the behaviors that we have decided are the right behaviors. When we start to create rewards for those behaviors, we start to cause damage. Here's why. One reason we can cause damage here is, for example, especially when we're working with teenagers and children, and when if we're working with neurodivergent folks as well. Teenagers, children, neurodivergent folks tend to be taught to obey completely without thinking, right? Children tend to be taught that you do whatever the adult says. So there's a power dynamic. I mean, outside of the power dynamic that's already in the voice studio, especially if you're someone like me. I've talked about power dynamics in the voice studio before as well, but if you're someone like me, I'm tall, I'm white, all of these things that have, there are all of these things that contribute, I'm an adult, that contribute to my power, my power dynamic in the voice studio, so that when I say things, students, especially children, teenagers, and often neurodivergent folks, when I say things, those folks, the more vulnerable folks, are far more likely to obey blindly, and when they can't accomplish the thing that I'm telling them to do, or when that behavior is too challenging for them to be able to do, or when I've set it up that poorly, they take that as an internal failing, right? A personal failing. I can't practice the way that my teacher tells me I'm supposed to, and therefore I am lazy. I can't practice, I can't read music. Learning to read music it has been very challenging for me, whether they have a diagnosis of whatever, and therefore I'm dumb. I'm not smart because I'm not learning I cannot even begin to tell you the amount of wonderful, wonderful musicians I know and voice teachers I know who still feel that they are somehow lazy or dumb, that they are not smart, because they spent their undergraduate and their high school careers learning music by listening rather than learning it from the score the way their teacher told them to. Yeah, so we start to internalize when we're not able to create that behavior, or we're not able to do that behavior. Even if there's a good reward, we're not able to do that behavior. We start to internalize that there's something wrong with us. because we accept whatever the teacher says as being the right thing, right? So we have this power dynamic where in the studio we're accepting that as being the right thing. All right, so then our students are like, clearly there's something wrong with me because I can't do that thing. All right, so what do we, yeah, and also there's lots of research out there that shows that external rewards actually decreases internal or intrinsic motivation. So the more we're offering external rewards, in fact, that actually only increases our desire for rewards. It doesn't actually increase our intrinsic motivation. I think I've got an eyelash going crazy here. Yeah. Give me 5 here. Oh gosh. Well, that's exciting. Here, let's take both of them off. I won't even edit that out. You know I won't. Just be like, yeah, whatever. All good. So there's lots of research that shows, and I might even like on Vimeo, I might even add a little chapter in there so you can like go right to it. And be like, where Shannon's eyelash comes off. Amazing. So we're in a power position. Students will do what we ask, and they'll think there's something wrong with us. Exactly. And the other thing that happens here too is that we start to not only do students start to think that there's something wrong with them, but they also then start to move into compliance-based, right? So we start to move into like compliance-based behavior, where I'm doing the thing not because I necessarily want to, but because I want to please the adult in my life, or because I want to please my voice teacher, or because I want to please the person who is in this power situation in my life, right? So that's compliance-based behavior, and that's not what we want. We don't want compliance-based behavior in the voice studio, do we? I don't think so. No. And in neurodivergent folks, often this teaches neurodivergent folks how to mask, right? So it teaches neurodivergent folks that who I am is not valid, and so I'm gonna just like put on this big old mask here and just do whatever you say I should be doing. So this is challenging. This is not what we want for our students. I hope this is not what we want for our students. Marta says, I make a point to fawn over those adults I have in choir who learn by ear. Yes, it's something I'm challenged by. Always with this is something you love. Do it however you can. Exactly right. Exactly right. Which brings me beautifully to so then how do we encourage intrinsic motivation? How do we encourage that in the voice studio? So something that I've talked about a lot, and that, maybe someday you might get tired of hearing me say it. Maybe today is that day. I don't know. But something that I talk about a lot is work with the student to find out their why. Why are they in the voice studio? Why are they taking voice lessons? Work with the student to find out their why. When you find out the why, you will find the ways to motivate the student. You will also figure out which behaviors are actually important for that student to develop. You'll figure that out as well, right? When you know the why of the student, you will then be able to take away all of the things that you think are the ways that must happen in the voice studio, and you'll be able to be like, oh yeah, actually, you know what? This singer, is a singer-songwriter. Do they really need to know how to read Mozart? No, they probably need to maybe figure out how to chord and how to like write down melodies, maybe. Or they need to figure out how to, get with someone who does write down melodies. Look, so I haven't confirmed this, but I heard recently that Brad Pitt is dyslexic. I heard that recently. And that he doesn't learn his scripts from reading them. Someone reads them to him and he learns them that way. Friends, Also, the wonderful, very famous soprano Beverly Sills, who has passed on now, but Beverly Sills, wonderful soprano, she had an accompanist, a repetiteur, they're called, come to her house every other day and work repertoire with her. She didn't learn her music from her score. She learned it with a repetiteur. So, like, there are examples all through history of folks who are who do the thing and they maybe feel like they're cheating in some way, but the only reason they feel like they're cheating is because someone at some point told them, oh, this is the right way to do it, and didn't ask them, what's your why? And also then, how can we get to your why in the ways that work for you? How can we do that? So if we come back to that list of some of the big things that were like, that I was talking about earlier, that we have in the voice studio, that are the big, like some of the big things that we don't question, and the big behaviors we don't question in the voice studio. So for example, like I said, learning to read music. Do we have a responsibility as voice teachers to make sure that students are literate in understanding how music works? Yes, I do think we have that responsibility in the voice studio, but to what level is always the question. And also, like, understanding, oh, I got a little pause there. Oh, sorry, over on Instagram, you got paused and then stopped. Live video ended. Oops. Sorry, Instagram. Sucks to be you. Anyway, so do we need to learn to read music? Depends on what we want to do with it, and it depends on like how far, like how much literacy we need to be able to do what we want to do. Really does depend on that. Practicing regularly, again, I've talked about this pretty often as well. So if a student, if it is important to the student to have a regular practice routine, not important to you, if it's important to the student because of their why, then let's find some other ways to motivate if they're not the kind of kid or adult who is motivated by, who likes to just sit down and practice every day. Like, there are lots of folks out there who do that. That's terrific. Practice every day. I personally am not one of those folks. But other ways to motivate practicing in the voice studio can be have a group practice, set up a group practice, a practicing group. Yes, thing. Where, and you know, in ADHD world, this is a thing now, actually. I'm just trying to remember what it's called. I wrote it down, right? What's it called? It's called body doubling in ADHD world. So ADHD folks who have ADHD brains will be like, hey, let's get on Zoom. I've got like 4 hours of work to do today. Let's get on Zoom and do it together. Not like talking to each other, nothing about like even like just a check-in at the beginning, but having, yes, group practice sessions are amazing, right? Having someone in front of me on the screen, just having another person there is going to help me to stay motivated to practice. Hi, Sarah, right? Body doubling. I mean, in the Speakeasy Cooperative and in other businesses and groups, they call it co-working. And this has become very popular and working very well now with like, Zoom and everybody online. I used to do it by going to a coffee shop. I go to a coffee shop, and just the fact that there were other people around me and I was like there with my laptop meant that I would work. If I'm at home by myself, I'm not going to get the same kind of work done. So body doubling, group practice sessions, they are beautiful for lots and lots of different reasons and for lots of students. Rebecca says, I remember as a teen piano student, a teacher getting so upset with me because I was using songs to help me recognize intervals for my RCM exam. Oh, it felt so dumb that I could not just instantly recognize them when I got shamed by my teacher for using the song trick. That is crazy and so annoying. Hi, Chantal. There's no right or wrong way or method just what works best for how that student learns, and then we utilize their learning method to fill in gaps where things are harder for them to grasp. Yes, still learning and growing in this as a teacher, absolutely. And I love that I'm starting to see this approach more in ideas on teaching platforms. Oh yes, so true, right? This is starting to become more and more seen on teaching platforms and with other teachers and in classroom teaching too. This is definitely starting to be, you know, that makes me ragey. I know, right, Sarah? Hi, Chantal. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad. um, so these are like, there are folks who are motivated, like I said in one of my earlier posts, there are folks who are really motivated by like internal reflection, journaling. So that can be a way to practice, right? You can set that up for folks, and you can also have that in your studio. If they're motivated by journaling, you can have your lessons, like rather than having them stand still for the whole lesson, they get to have like 3 journal times where they get to like write down some things that works really that they're noticing, or they get to give themselves a voice note, things that they're noticing in their lesson. I mean, find the thing that motivates, find their why, and then figure out what the thing is that's going to work for them. I wrote down a couple of other things. Oh yeah, so students who don't appear to be paying attention, or students who are really fidgety, I've talked about this before as well, or students who want to lie down the whole lesson. I mean, students can lie down if they want to, but I also have a big old yoga ball, so you can just bounce away on the yoga ball all day long in my lesson. Totally great. I love it. Or a Bosu ball. And you can use fidget toys. Yeah, Sarah, I integrate it into everything I do as a form of assessment. Reflecting on what you're doing is worthy. I love it, Sarah. So I hate reflecting on what I'm doing. That like internal reflection for me is like not my favorite at all. But what I do love is external discussion. So like reflecting where it's just me journaling, it's just me like journaling and reflecting. No. But if you get me with, someone who wants to talk about it, yeah, let's talk about it, right? So that's the way that I can reflect. I use all I've got in the arsenal so they can use what works for them. Yes, numbering and solfege and songs, whatever works for them. Yes, 100%. If we're learning, if learning intervals is something that is important to you and to the student, right? So if you're doing conservatory exams, then you're likely going to want to learn some intervals and figure that out. Choose repertoire with students. I can't even say how strongly I have come to this in recent years. I felt, and it took me a while to come to this balance too, because I felt for a very long time that it was my responsibility as a voice teacher to introduce my students to styles and repertoire that they would not otherwise come across, because here they are and taking voice lessons, and so it is my responsibility to do that. And I do still feel that that is true. I feel that it is true today, as it was back in the day, that we do have a responsibility to introduce our students to styles and repertoire that they would not otherwise come across if they weren't taking voice lessons. However, we really need to work hard to find the balance between us imposing that on the student and us opening a door for a student, right? There is a real balance between those two things. And if we're opening doors for students where we're saying, hey, I see you love this, you know what? This, you love this specific song with this kind of like theme in it. Here's the same thing in like a country song. Here's like an art song. Here is a, what are they called? Songs for the people, by the people, I don't know, like, or here's a popular song, here's a song in this other genre, here's what are they called? Hi there. Like Herbert Hughes and like folk song, thank you. Yeah, thank you, brain. So here's a folk song that has a similar theme. Or I see that there's like this rhythmicalness that you seem to love in the repertoire that you're listening to and choosing, I would love for you to maybe take a little listen to some Stravinsky. Maybe not Stravinsky right off the top, but like something that has that same like earthiness and you know, rhythmic, that intensity in it. So there's a difference between imposing what we think they should know and what we think is good for them, and opening the door to some other things that may also then pique their curiosity, pique their imagination, maybe intriguing and fascinating for them, right? So we want to find that balance when we're introducing rep, and when we're working in rep. You know, sitting down, students can sit for a whole lesson. They can do that. We can have like no lesson lessons, right? And again, if you've followed me for any amount of time, you will know that I think we, especially in an independent voice studio, why aren't we normalizing not coming to a lesson when you are, when you need a mental health break? Why aren't we normalizing that? Why are we not doing that? Right? Rebecca says, yes, on choosing with the student instead of imposing our songs on them. It has changed my studio. I love that. Working with them, helping them, student-led, of course, and helping them discover songs that suit them, but that they love. Exactly. And finding that exploration. It makes them so much more motivated. I mean, when we talk about motivation to practice, who is motivated to practice something they don't want to sing? No one. In no way is anyone motivated to practice something that they hate. Or that they didn't have, you know, that they don't have a reason to practice. Agreed. And yes, balance. This has worked to just try a bit of everything. I had a country girl fall in love with a quilter. I'd love it. A goth girl fall in love with music theater. Yes. Just to expand the possibilities, but trying just one to give it a try. Exactly. Opening that door, I think, is so important. And again, I do think it's a responsibility of ours as voice teachers to open the door without imposing. Yeah, tricky. But we can find the way. So yeah, no lessons, right? We have this expectation of having, like, you know, if you don't come to every single lesson every single week, then you're not a good student, or, you know, and we give out like attendance awards and all that stuff, and we do, you know, we do that stuff, and then, you know, we get mad at parents if they don't bring their kid and all that stuff, or we, you know, like we get mad at students if they're like, if they do come to the lesson, but they're like so tired, or they're so like, you know, they're so depressed or whatever that they can't actually sing. And then we're like, that was a terrible lesson. Well, you know what would have been maybe a better thing is if they had the option to stay home, which lots of folks are staying home anyway, because hi, they're coming. But if they had the option to stay home and, you know, choose, well, I won't do a whole thing, but there are lots of other ways to do a no lesson lesson. So no lessons. We can do that. Yes, body doubling, choosing, and so many ways to motivate practicing, you know, including telling students that all you want them to do is walk past the piano and play a note every once in a while. That's all you want them to do. They don't have to practice. They just want to walk past the piano. And when we achieve that balance, they're far more receptive to us introducing them to new repertoire they have not heard. So true. Once they've had the experience of you sort of opening, of having that door opened a little bit, they're like, oh, well, that's very interesting. I wouldn't mind trying a little bit more of that, actually. And they trust us to, that trust factor is there. I have recorded the entire RCM early grade so students can go listen and choose their own rep. Yes, and yes, exactly. Allison, that is the whole thing. Giving students choice, student-led and choice, right? Having these, because it can be tricky when we're working with the Royal Conservatory of Music, or we are working from syllabi. It can be tricky, but yes. I also, I used to, I don't anymore, well, they're probably still somewhere. I would have whole listening lists from YouTube. of songs in grades. So, Allison, your skills are higher than mine, I think, in terms of like playing and singing at the same time. Mine are not that high. In terms of doing classical rep that way. So no, I had listening lists for exams, exactly. So then, like here's the grade 2 listening list. And I would listen. Sometimes we spend a lesson. That can be a no lesson. You're not feeling well enough to come to your lesson today. It was a rough day at school or whatever. Something's happened or all good. No problem. That's no problem. Here's the entire grade 2 listening list. I would love for you to listen through and tell me your top 3 choices. Yeah. Yeah, give choice. Love it. So and that's not to say. So here's the thing too. I want to just bring this back around to the behavior based reward system, or that external reward system. Oh, you have recordings through the piano. That's not cheating. Remember, Allison, that's not cheating. That's just doing what works. Have you been listening this whole time? Because that's not cheating. Anyway, so the bringing this kind of back around, when you find a student's why, and when you're working with that student, it was student-led and giving choices, you may find that there are students who are super motivated by putting a gold star in a calendar every single time they practice, and by maybe writing down 2 or 3 things about what they practiced, and or maybe they're motivated by like sending you a little note every time they practice, or they're motivated by sending you a 30-second recording of that just tells you what they practiced every time. Like, you may find folks who are motivated by that external who are motivated by that external behavior reward system. And lots of times adults will be able to articulate this and say, you know what, I love, I'm gonna, buy myself this bottle of wine when I practice this many times in the month. Terrific, right? If folks are motivated that way, that's terrific. I'm not motivated that way. Sometimes they're like, tell yourself that if you read, if there's a goal you want, and, you want to read more, then if you've read all of, just then you can set yourself a reward that is going to be great for you. And I'm like, I'm just going to buy the thing anyway. I want it. Those kind of external rewards do not work for me, but they do work for some people. And so you'll find some people who they work really well for. Sometimes ADHD brains work very, very well with a calendar, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a reward system either, right? But sometimes ADHD brains work really well by setting up a practice calendar where they have an alarm set, and like every time, yeah. Oh, I have in the last month put mine online. Oh, isn't that so beautiful? Ah, Allison. That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Songwords RCM playlist. Ah, love it. Love it. But yeah, so you may find that there are folks who are, who are motivated this well. Like I said, ADHD brains often are motivated really well. Speaking of, okay, one more thing. And I like to talk about this especially in my child voice practicums, which, by the way, February, another child voice practicum coming up, but is finding the uber interest. So somebody commented, wow, this office hour is gonna actually be an office hour. What do you know? Somebody commented a little while ago on one of my posts about something like, well, external motivation works for ADHD brains because they don't have internal motivation, right? They can't motivate internally. And that's just not true. That is a fallacy, actually. So, in fact, ADHD brains often are uber focused, and autistic brains often are uber focused. They'll have like an uber focus, like a super high fixation on one thing, right? And so that's the thing du jour, and that is the thing that is very, very interesting to them. Some people call it following the dopamine, right? Like, that's where the dopamine's going right now. Whether that's actually what's happening or not, who knows? But some people are like, follow the dopamine. So this is the thing that's super, super interesting to me right now. And when that when we can tap into that interest, if we can find the thing that is super interesting to whoever we're working with at the time, if we can tap into that thing, that will also help with internal motivation, right? Because I'm motivated by my uber fixation on whatever this specific topic is, or it may be a topic, it may be a character, it may be a book series, it may be a video series, it may be a specific, like, maybe forests, it may be a country, it may be, there's so many things that can hold us super interested. Maybe a crafting idea, hyper focus, exactly. And that hyper focus, man, it's a super strength. If you can tap into that hyper focus, and that super interest, you will find ways and put, if practicing is the thing that's important to you, or if standing still in the lesson, or not standing still in the lesson, that's not super important, but like if creating like a different kind of focus level in the lesson is important to you, choosing repertoire, all of the things that are going to align with that student's why, if you can tap into that hyper focus, whatever that fixation is for the time being, you will get, like, it is a superpower. You will find all of the internal motivation for all of the things. Like, all of the motivation will be there. Ask me how I know this. It will all be there. So that's another thing to just consider, is like, what is the interest of the student right now? Okay, so quick recap. We have, we often impose our ideas of what is supposed to happen in a voice studio, in a lesson, in a practice situation, how we're supposed to learn music, et cetera, et cetera. We often impose those ideas around behavior onto our students. And then in order to motivate them, we try to get an external behavior-based reward system going. And those behavior-based reward systems can be very damaging, and can also just not work. They just don't work often. And in fact, the only people they work for are the folks who are motivated to do the thing anyway. The folks who really like practicing every single day anyway are the folks who are going to get all the gold stars. No one else is going to get those gold stars, because that external motivation doesn't work. And in some cases, it can be damaging. And so what are we going to do instead? We're going to come back to the student's why. We're going to work with the student within their own interests, and give them choices that are within their own interest. Find ways to engage from the student's why and from their interest level. And really consider all the things that we think are the one true way, right? As soon as we start to think, well, it has to be that way, maybe consider, does it actually have to be that way? Because maybe it doesn't actually have to be that way. Do I actually have to practice alone in a practice room with a piano for the rest of my life? Dear heavens! I can't do that. I don't think I can do that. That's not in my personality. And so we can find a different way to do it. All right. Take good care. This was a long one. Have a terrific holiday. Have a terrific weekend. And let's talk next week. Take care.